right, I think we're good to go. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. We are excited to kind of host our third monthly webinar around an LEA Medicaid panel discussion. So this one is going to be really focused on our LEAs and their kind of experience running the program. Why this webinar is because you've heard a lot from us as HPC, a Medicaid school billing company in Ohio, about the best practices around expansion and certain things that you need to do to stay compliant as it relates to Medicaid billing and maximizing reimbursement. What we haven't talked much about is what does all of this look like from an LEA perspective? And that's why we wanted to bring a couple of your peers on today to talk through that. And so that you can kind of get best practices, any sort of takeaways, workflows, compliance readiness, and some insights onto how these folks are running their successful programs. And so I'm going to turn it over to introduce our two panelists here on the call today. We've got Lisa Floyd from Cleveland and Jack Stevens from Mad River. Lisa, do you want to start and kick us off?
Sure. So my name is Lisa Floyd, and I am with the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. I am the Medicaid manager and the budgets manager for the special education. Our district, we're about 33,000 students, and about 70% of our students are Medicaid eligible students. And the bulk of our provider participation is in-house. We only contract for one area, and that is our one-to-one nurses, and everything else is in-house. One operational win that we have is our DocuSign. So that was a game changer for CMSD. So that's it, and I'll turn it over to Jack.
All right. I'm Jack Stevens. I'm the special supervisor for Mad River Local Schools. We're in Dayton, right next to Wright Pat Air Force Base. We're slightly smaller. We only have about 3,800 students. And so, as a special supervisor, that's one of the many hats that I wear is managing Medicaid. And we have most of our staff is actually district employed, except we do contract out with OT and PT from our local ESC. And then as far as like a operational, what'd you call it, operational win or victory, I would say, when we first started doing Medicaid, we kept everything on paper for parent consents, and that was a nightmare to keep up with. And once we started utilizing, we don't use DocuSign, but we do use Same Goal, and we do utilize the Medicaid consent form in there to keep track of everything. So it's easy if and when we need to pull that record, as opposed to looking through hundreds and hundreds of parent consent forms. So that has saved us quite a bit of time.
Great. Thank you both. And then Collette, I see that you've been able to join as our third presenter from Sandusky. I know we're having some technical difficulties. Are you able to come off mute?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us. If you can introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your district. And I know I'm throwing you on the spot, but maybe if you have one operational win that you want to talk about that you've implemented.
So I'm Collette Fox. I'm with Sandusky City Schools, and I am the administrative assistant of our student services department. But I maintain all of the Medicaid information. One of our wins, I would have to say it is finally getting everybody on board with getting the one-time consents and reducing our list. When I first started, we had over 100 kids, and now I think I've got it down to like maybe 5 or 10 every month that I'm trying to track down to get one-time consents.
Great. Well, thank you for the introduction, Collette. I think you went ahead and kind of a great segue into our first topic, and what I think is our most popular topic is parent consent. So capturing it, tracking it, and maintaining it. And so I would love to hear from all three panelists on how is the consent obtained today. I know we talked about electronic versus paper. How do districts notify parents of the kind of annual notification workflow, who owns the process, and where it's stored to ensure that they're audit ready? So I'll turn it over to Lisa, Jack, Collette, if one of you want to start and talk about how it's handled at your district.
So I'll
Pretty-
take it.
Okay.
So here we use both. So we use electronic and paper. Which however if we have a parent that's in person, we'll have them sign in person. If we can say, hey, here's this form from the IEP meeting, we include it as part of that process, or if they're getting any type of services, here's the form, we're sending it to you, signed it, and send it back. And so we use whatever method that's available at the time. So if the parent comes in person, sign it in person. If the parent is virtual, we do it virtually. So either option. And we use Smartsheet here. And so because Smartsheet allows you to attach, so we attach in our Smartsheet for tracking, and we attach in our system, our students information system. So it's in both places. And for our annual notification via email, we have email for all of our parents. And so we just send us one email every year to each parent. And the workflow. And so here we use our nurses, we use our psychologists, our intervention specialists. And so we are lucky enough to have liaisons at our buildings. And so we also utilize our special education liaisons, and we'll send a list and say, hey, these are the students that are missing parental consents. We'll send it to the nurse. So the way we're structured here, and so in CMSD, we actually have a Medicaid department. So it's me, and then I have 2 additional Medicaid specialists, and I don't think any other district has that in the state. So we are very, very lucky to have that particular structure. We own it. So we own like the process for tracking, loading, and updating. And so we have it in 2 places. Just in case, like, so something happened with student information system, so something happened with Smartsheet, we always have a backup. So that's kind of how we do it here. And I know we are pretty lucky to have like dedicated Medicaid specialists here. So.
Yeah. Jack, I know you were going next. I know your district is a little bit different than Lisa's. Why don't you give some insight on how it works at your district?
So, I mean, anytime we have the initial contact with a parent for special ed, whether it be a move-in student that transfers or for initiating the ETR, so if it's speech pathologist or the school psych, like they're getting that consent when they're getting consent for the ETR, or the intervention specialist is getting that Medicaid consent when they are, doing that initial IEP that a student is transferred over with. And like similarly, so we do things electronically and by paper. But if we do it by paper, we're uploading that document to the same place. So like every month we get those missing consents or pending consents. So we're going through those, and we can look and find those documents quite easily, and we can update the consent list. There's times where we can look in that where it's supposed to be and it's not where it's supposed to be. So we're communicating out to the intervention specialist, the case manager, to say you need to go ahead and follow up with the parents and get this consent signed. I mean, that's pretty much the gist of it, I think, at Mad River.
Yeah. Collette, do you want to talk about Sandusky and any differences in your process there?
I think we're very similar to Jack. We do ours electronically and paper. We have iPads so we can get electronic signatures right at meetings, which has been great. The other thing, annually, we have them at their IEP meetings. Since we have to do IEP meetings every year, they constantly giving out information at the IEP meetings for the annual notification. As far as our workflow and follow-up, I'm on the intervention specialist, the psychs, whoever I can to make sure that we're constantly getting those updated or getting the information that we need. Other than that, as far as where we store it, we do store it electronically and paper. I'm with Lisa in case something, our systems crash or whatever, I still have it on paper just in case.
Great. Okay. Tracy, do you want to just quickly add in from a billing perspective the importance of parent consent? Lisa, Jack, and Colette talked about, operationally, but maybe just 30 seconds of why it's important, what's required.
So the one-time life consent is required by federal Medicaid in order for us to share student information so school districts can obtain Medicaid reimbursement. So it's very important that we do collect the parent consent, and as all billing vendors, you have a system in place, and HPC will not go in and submit anything unless we have identified that parent consent has been obtained. The student may have all the other information it needs, but that is the first thing we look for, is making sure parent consent is obtained. Moving forward, we've talked about current systems and processes. It's going to require us to look at this differently, because you may have to you will need to capture for all students if you're going to start documenting for services to all students for Medicaid eligible services. So the processes that they have in place are good. I did hear some school districts were thinking about putting the parent consent in final forms so they can collect that. I also think that a good thing to do, and something we're working with as well, is now we're going to be capturing more students. More information needs to be put in our system to identify parent consent. So we're working where maybe if you have it done electronically, like with final forms, you can export the form, and if they say yes, no, and the date and the electronic signature, we want to be able to work with the school district so we can integrate that information. So you get that maybe once a year, and then you're not always having to manually go into our system and upload that. So I think that's something we're looking to do. And we're ready to, work with any of the school districts if what platforms they have. Minimally, we need to identify the specs for that, but that's going to save schools a lot of time. And I think, and I don't know, Jack or Colette, do you guys use the final form system, or if anyone else? I've heard that quite a bit, that this final forms is allowing them to put it in, that they can sign it. And then they can actually export that electronically. So I don't know if anybody wants to weigh on that, but in order for any school district to move forward with expansion, they will need to obtain parent consent for all students that receive services for reimbursement.
Right. And we've got some people that are awake in the audience saying that they do use final forms. I thought, 9 a.m. meeting, I thought people were being extra quiet so far because we're talking about parent consent. One quick question, and then we're going to move it on to the next topic because I want to get to it. Does the district need to have the one-time consent for all students in the district to be able to bill for hearing and vision screenings?
Yes.
Okay.
Any student that we're submitting reimbursement for, a parent consent you can document it, you can have the data stored, but we cannot submit it to Medicaid unless we see that parent consent has been obtained. So in talking to some of the other school districts, maybe an approach would be that, vision and hearing is a opportunity to include nursing, RNs, LPNs, that would help you include, and you're incurring costs, so your allowable costs will go up. And one way to get them on is to have them do the vision and hearing, but maybe start with just the students that you already have identified that are special ed. They're going through the process, and you have parent consent for them as you're rolling this out. It's going to take time. It's a lot of information you have to gather, but you do need to have it if you're going to get reimbursed for those services.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tracy. All right, let's move on to the next. We talked a lot about document storage, where we store these parent consents. But there's a lot of other documents, right? There's a lot of document storage that needs to happen at the district. So I'm going to ask the panelists, where are the key audit documents stored in index? So not only parent consent forms, but the ETRs, IEPs. We've got this new school services plan of care that we talked about with expansion. Your district may or may not be there yet. any sort of attendance records or just anything that's relevant that you're not capturing in your documentation system for billing, where do you store some of these documents? Can you talk about what documents those are? I'll turn that over to the panelists.
I can go first and just share like for all of our special ed documents, we keep those in we have a file room in our central office, but also ensure we keep records of all those in the same goal. So things like ETRs where there's multiple parts of it that are not one standalone document in same goal. I do have all of our staff that do the ETRs scan the full standalone document and attach it to the ETR so that if and when we need to pull that for whatever purpose, for Medicaid, audits, or just records requests, we can grab those documents pretty easily. And then the student information system we use is Progress Book. So things like attendance would all be in there.
And so in Cleveland, we're a power school district. And so every month, my staff is checking for uploads to make sure documents have been uploaded to Power School Special Programs. So that is where we store ETRs, IEPs, once the meeting is over, intervention specialists, the case managers, either a psych, SLP for ETRs. They're uploaded into Power School Special Programs, and once you attach it, it's there. So that's like, and then for the actual session notes, each department, so nursing services, we use SNAP, and so they attach the medication orders, so all of the prescriptions that we have, the additional plans that we have, they're all attached in SNAP. And so it's the same thing. So we have OTPTs have their own like documentation system. And then we also have they use SOP Toolkit for our speech therapists. So each individual department also uses a separate like tracking system for like their actual therapeutic notes and sessions. And so that's kind of the process that we have here in Sandusky.
I'm the same with Jack. We use same goal. And then once an ETR or IEP are completed, we scan the completed signatures, everything in and attach it. Therapy notes are scanned in there. And then we also use DocuWare. So we also scan a copy into DocuWare as well, which is an electronic storage for whatever you need. We have it in there as well. So we do have it saved in 2 different places. And then we also have the hard files like Jack said.
Okay, great. And maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but we've got this new school services plan of care as it relates to expansion. And I know every district, there's no right or wrong answer here because every district is in their own journey as it relates to Medicaid expansion, rightfully so. Can any one of the panelists, has anyone started to think about who's responsible for ensuring the school services plan of care include the required elements of signatures, what the review cadence, expiration dates might look like at their district as it relates to expansion? Lisa, I'm looking at you maybe.
Oh, Jack was talking.
Oh, Jack was on mute.
Mute.
Sorry. Okay.
I was going to say that I've been thinking about how we're going to roll that out because this is going to be a pretty major shift for us. I don't know that we're going to go 100% every student. I think we're probably going to be rolling this out somewhat slowly where we can probably get the most bang for our buck. So like I think of our social workers and the counseling services and the interventions they provide, for example, that might be the first line that I utilize for going through this process just to roll it out and see how it all works out. I mean, other students that have things like 504s that would capture that service or emergency action plans for medical needs, those would probably capture those services too. So like we'd have to go through and figure out which of those kids we have most of that plan for already versus who we need an entire plan from scratch.
And so here, like, so we basically, when we looked at expansion, we looked at like additional areas where we could add additional providers. So in thinking about who's already on our cost report, we look to see, hey, what additional services are we currently providing, that all it would take is updating the current forms that we have to meet the requirements of the school services. So we targeted our school nurses. That was the area that we decided to move forward with for the expansion. And so in our SNAP system, so you create the forms. So you decide, like, hey, if you want to add like the first 2 pages, because diabetes plans, asthma action plans, all you have to do is just make sure, like, the information that you currently have, because remember, on that school services plan, you check a box. So most of the students that we targeted already have those plans. And so you would just use the alternative documentation check, and then add the first 2 pages of the school services plan. And then you're covered because it contains everything that you need to implement. And so that's the kind of the way we decided to do it here. We targeted nursing services here because we don't have social workers through our district. Those services are provided through our Say Yes program here. So we don't necessarily have, and we don't pay for those services, so we can't put them on our cost report. What we can add is nurses because they're ours and we pay for them. That's why we added that.
But you're saying though SNAP will house that plan? Is that where that's going to be? So I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
it's for as far as like Jack and Collette, if you're using these new plans, that's like, how will they get to, like Kritesh said, making sure they're compliant, and where would those be stored? Because typically, special ed, we're saving all those records for a very long time, and the general population, these new plans, where will they be saved? I do think one suggestion Lisa told us when we were talking, that she created a general mailbox for the school that was like related to Medicaid, so that documents could be forwarded there and then somebody saves them. That's a good idea. But the long term is these plans need to be stored. Can they be stored in Same Goal or other programs like that? I know SNAP keeps the nursing, so I don't know how that would look in other school districts. Jack, what do you think, or Colette?
I would just share that I'm hoping Same Goal will have that form that's available to us at some point in time. Right now, I don't believe it's in there, but they do constantly add forms for us. So that'd be one approach. But if I can get, I'll have to consult with our nurses too, because I think that's another avenue that I want to explore as well.
Right now we're looking at scanning, because you can scan and upload the plans into Same Goal. I'm with Jack until they get the forms in there. That's how we had planned on storing them, is just putting them in there as an upload and letting everybody know that it's a care plan. Other than that, Jack, I've reached out to Same Goal, so hopefully
Thank you.
hopefully we'll get somewhere.
And we're also, I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole here, but we are also, as expansion rolls out, as we think about getting better serving our clients, we're also looking at potential things like this. So like, I think these are things that we should all be kind of working together on with the district. But this kind of is a great segue into a next topic, which is just tools. So Collette, Jack, and Lisa, you all have talked about a lot of tools that you use at the district, be it your kind of document storage tools or the shared inbox. Can you all give an idea of some of the district tools that support your workflow that you found very useful? Obviously, you can steer away from your documentation software, right? Because we all know that you have to use that. But what are some of the ancillary tools that you use, right? DocuSign, some of those things to help facilitate some of the processes at your district.
So like Tracy just said here, like we've had our dedicated, so we kept it simple. It's literally Medicaid at clevelandmetropolitanschools.org. And so when the nurses send, hey, you have a paper copy of a parental consent form. They email it to their mailbox. We need to send something to parents. It comes from that mailbox. So that allows us to like capture these copies of paper forms that we normally, oh, we're going to put it in the school mail. Nope, don't put it in the school mail. Just email it here. And so not only do we have a copy in the email, which stays, but we're able to download it and upload it to wherever we need to upload it. And the same thing with like DocuSign. So for us, especially, so this came about because of COVID. And so we went from in-person meetings to online meetings. And so using DocuSign, like it's a part of the process, they sign it, boom, it's virtual, it timestamps the signature, and then you can create an additional flow. Like, oh, you missed this form, you can send an additional email that says, hey, mom, I'm sending you this form. This is, you missed it during your IEP meeting, or you didn't sign, or however, we need to send it. Here's the link. If you click the link and sign it, either check yes or no. Here's like review it, sign it, give us permission or not, sign it, and it automatically dates it. And then we have it in DocuSign. So we just go to DocuSign, click download, and it's there. And then when our psychologist or when our OTs, PTs, speech therapists, intervention specialists, when they're using it, we also use that as the resource. So if it hasn't been uploaded, like we'll go look for it before we reach out to staff. And so like DocuSign, just additional tools that sometimes you need to tap into because the flow process, it's so many different ways that we contact parents or we interact with parents, and we don't necessarily, like sometimes you have to go outside of your own workflow process. And so we've been able to pretty much tackle any required paperwork just by using like a dedicated mailbox and DocuSign together. So those were like the tools for us because it worked prior to us having, even when we were doing paper copies, it worked for us just having this central mailbox. And it's a way for providers when they have questions. It's a way for parents when they have questions. Everybody just emails the box. Hey, you need to contact us. Here's the email address.
I'll just say we don't have a lot of ancillary tools at our disposal. I would say, the ancillary tools would be myself and our student services secretary, trying to keep up with everything. So the only thing I would add that I have not shared before is that, I've got lots of checklists, things that require staff to follow processes and procedures. So making sure that I incorporate, those things into those checklists that, for initial IEPs and initial ETRs and transfers, like those are just part of the process for us. And of course, people forget just like everything else. And so like having that monthly report where we can check and see what we have as far as pending consents and which consents are still missing, and be able to check that pretty easily. And same goal is our only saving grace.
Collette, how about yourself? Anything to add there?
We're pretty similar to Jack. The only big tool that I can think of, we do use our iPads at every single meeting to get those signatures right away at our planning meetings for the one-time consent. And with the upcoming changes, we plan on having those readily available for 504 meetings and care plans and stuff like that as well.
Okay. Great. The next section I want to move on to is around provider accountability. Let's switch gears a little bit and how folks on this call kind of manage the providers. And you've got, 3 different people on this call who run 3 different programs. And you've got, Lisa and Jack really at the director level, and Collette, I think of you really as the warrior, right? I mean, like the day-to-day and the weeds of running the program as well. But before we get there, I'm going to throw a little curveball to all of this, the special ed folks on the call, because I know we've got some treasurers on the call. And so if each one of you can share, and sorry for throwing you on the spot, one way that you work with your treasurer as it relates to the Medicaid school program. And if you don't currently work with your treasurer as much as you can, to the extent that you don't get in trouble, talk about the wish list of how you want to get them involved as, this starts to become a big focus in Ohio. And so, maybe if your treasurer or CFO is on the call, they'll be able to pick up on that. But I think that might be a valuable topic here. So I'll start with whoever wants to go first to answer that curveball of a question.
I mean, I'll just share that I work with our treasurer. I don't know how I would characterize this, but he's communicating with me about what we're bringing in, like how that changes from year to year, and so it kind of gives me a little bit of ammunition to go back to our staff. And when things are slowing down, we're not keeping up with our documentation enough, I get to have some direct conversations, I think, like, where I see kind of the ebbs and flows of why we're not capturing the same documentation for services. But as far as like communicating with staff, I do look at those monthly reports. And so what I'm doing is I'm looking at, is a provider keeping up? So kind of a general rule of thumb we have in Mad River is that, don't fall more than a month behind, because once you do, you can't get out of that hole. So, when I see people that are a month behind at the time of their documentation, then I'm having individual conversations with them. And typically that takes care of it, but I do have some repeat customers I have that conversation with.
That's great.
So here, I work, I think, fairly closely with our CFO, because when I'm like, hey, this is what we need to make this expansion happen. Here's the numbers. Here is where we potentially can see some additional revenue pickups. Here is what it'll cost us. Here is what our potential additional revenue is by expanding. Here is, hey, this is the contract for this school year. Are you okay with reviewing now? Do you want to move forward? And so, and he's like, hey, could you run the numbers so we can have projections for our 5-year forecast? So I work pretty closely with him as it relates to, and his staff as it relates to Medicaid and Medicaid expansion. And so like provider accountability here, we, our requirement is the first Monday of the following month. Ideally, we would love to do it live in real time, because it reduces the amount of errors that you have. My staff reviews and follows up. So if we are missing signatures, if we are missing a document, my staff they are the ones that follow up, because we're fortunate enough to have Medicaid specialists. So, but we email their directors. So if we're not getting a response, then we loop in their directors and we send the directors, hey, here's the activity for this month. Here's where, this is what it should be. This is what it currently is. And so we work very closely with our related service directors around missing billing from our providers.
I run the reports a couple times a month for missing addresses, the consent, and the documentation. And then I'm the one that gets to contact the staff that says I need. But they're pretty good about it. I mean, it's pretty quick turnaround when I do tell them that we're missing something or we're behind on something. But as far as the auditor goes, or our treasurer goes, I typically don't deal with her. My supervisor does. So she's the jack of our building, but she's the one that usually has to deal with the audit or treasurer. So I don't get the pleasures of working with her as much.
That's fair. And I know, I think there's a lot of work that the special education, even director of people services and student services, that all falls under the umbrella that takes on that sometimes is not visible across the organization, right? Because you're doing so much on a day-to-day. And so that's why I asked that question, because, I know at least a few special directors have come back to us saying, my treasurer is answering, asking these questions on how do we take advantage of expansion? How do we do all these things? And I think starting off with just a bare level understanding of what the program looks like today at the school district is a good start, right? And like what the benefit of it is. And there may be a backlog of resources that you need to maintain the revenue that you're getting today. And so how to properly communicate that, I think, is really important with the person that really owns the entire kind of financial process at a district. Anything else on provider accountability that you three want to talk about at your district in terms of like, is there a particular metric that matters to you the most or that you see at your district that continues to get missed? Is there a new, process that you put in place or a new message to providers that works really well to get them on board to understand the importance of Medicaid billing? I mean, is there anything else that we want to talk about there?
So like I don't think we particularly add anything, but I think keeping them in the loop about what's going on, what the expansion means, how it ties to their work and what, the districts benefit from that happening because they are always open here and ready to like, hey, what can we do? And so I meet with them too. And so like we have each group has we have like I do the training when they come back every year. We go to their individual back to school meetings and we present at the meetings. And so that's like keeping the lines of communications open, I think has worked to our benefit. And we're able to, because then if everybody is aware of what's going on, it makes it easier when you're saying, hey, this is missing. And so just, making sure you inform them. And so when you're sending and you set all these processes up, here's the new information, you send out emails, here's the process for this is what you need, because they are the providers in your districts are the ones that are really doing the work for Medicaid billing. So just keeping those lines of communication open seems to have a positive impact on the bottom line.
And I'll just piggyback on what Lisa was saying is since you guys jumped in, but we've not jumped into the expansion yet. So I'm spending this time right now just having conversations with our providers that are potentially going to be impacted because their questions are already going to start going into the workload issue of how much time this is going to take. And so I don't have all those answers yet, but it does allow us to start thinking about that, how it could potentially impact workload for additional documentation.
Collette, anything you want to add there before we move on?
Jack said everything I was going to. We're still working on how we want to roll out the expansion and like he said, who's going to be in charge of what and where it's going to be and stuff like that. We're still working on the final details.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
I wanted, before we moved off the subject of treasurer, I just wanted to inform, or maybe not everybody knows this, but one thing that all special ed or anyone in charge or overseeing the program, especially if you're involved in the process where you have the AUP and you must forward documents, supporting documents to your accounting firm, when that process is taking place, the accounting firms, then they're required to review all that information. And if something's missing, like a signature on an IEP or an attendance record, all that information has to be logged on something called a Schedule P. And that Schedule P really shows you where things maybe could be improved in your program or what you're missing. And Department of Medicaid does review that to make sure schools are staying compliant. And they'll compare from year to year if you've gotten doing better or you're still doing the same, missing the same information, and they'll contact the schools if you're not improving. So I think sometimes the treasurers receive the finalized cost report from their accounting firm, and in there is your Schedule P. And I would suggest that you get with your treasurer and let them share that information with you if you're not already involved in reviewing that or we're not familiar with it. But it is your gauge on a yearly basis to see where you're at with compliance in your documentation. You go through gathering that information, you'd like to see how it fared out. So I would suggest, getting involved in that process as well.
Thanks, Tracy. Yep. I think that rounds out this topic. So I'm going to move on to a very, I think, highly anticipated, maybe not for the panelists, but this new random moment time study change. See, there we go. I got a couple. So obviously, and if you haven't heard by now, please reach out to us. There is a new change to the random moment time study that is going to impact the state of Ohio, and the Department of Medicaid rolled this change out. And so this is fairly new. So I don't want to put pressure on the panelists, but for those that have, attended, have kind of the webinars that ODM has thrown, have learned this new process, have kind of, received some guidance to the extent it's made sense from Tracy and Cheryl. I'll just start with a couple of questions and then you all can take it where you want to go. There's been a new change to the random moment time study. How are districts planning to kind of identify and maintain the participant list internally? Obviously, with the help of billing vendors to the extent that, we can. Have you identified the person that's going to actually submit the list, right? Like hit click on the button to submit. It could be you. And then what support do you foresee needing from your partners, whether it's HPC, whether it's someone at your district, to kind of ensure that the lists continue to be accurate, continue to be repeatable?
I would just say, I mean, I like that we get quarterly reminders to update our list right now. And so, like if HPC, I don't know if that's information that's going to be solicited or we have to remember to update it periodically. I mean, we only have maybe 20 some odd, actually probably more than that, probably more like 30 district-wide staff who can document and bill for Medicaid. So at this point in time, it's manageable. And even with the expansion, that's not going to change. So, I mean, it'll still be me.
Well, I can just mention from what we plan so far from what we know. And what we do know is the due dates are always going to stay the same. They're always a month ahead of time that you have to have that information in. So HPC will be sending you just a list of the current active therapists we have in our system and reminding you this time to go and verify your participant list and reminding you what the due date is. So we will be doing that. So that is something, Jack, that we've already decided that's going to help you. Until we get more information, that's just where our starting point. So obviously we need feedback from our clients to see how we can help, but we will remind you of those dates and give you the current update of your providers.
And so we are a little bit more complicated because we have like over 300 providers that we're tracking at any given time. You have providers going in and out on LOAs. So it's going to be challenging, and unfortunately or fortunately, I'm the point person in our district for that. So we shall see how it all is gonna play out. A little nervous because, I've always, you lean pretty heavily on your billing vendor for that. Because it wasn't a requirement. Yes, you have the list and you track it, but they're the ones that are going back and double checking on format in case you may have missed somebody or you had them before. And now they're not, are they back? So just, figuring out how to close that gap, because I really relied on them to like double check. Like here's the list, and they were my second pair of eyes to make sure that it was correct. So I think that is going to be a challenge, and hopefully we are gonna rise to that challenge. And make sure that we are as accurate as possible. Again, we use, for random moment time study, we use Smartsheet because you can send a link to your providers and say, please update your schedule. Because that's how we've always done it. We just send the link out and say, update your schedule, and it highlights and lets me know if any changes were made to that line. So that's, we relied on that pretty heavily. So I'm hoping that that'll allow us to fairly easily take over. But hopefully we can do this, because we'll need everybody to help.
I'm about the same size as Jack, so we don't have quite as many providers as Lisa does. I will be the person putting all that information in. And I'm with Jack. Those reminders every month or every quarter have been great. So I'm glad that you guys are still going to do that. I think our biggest problem I might have is with some of our outside agencies are, we use North Point for OTPT. Sometimes they have a lot of changes and they don't tell us right away. So if I don't have that information, it's just going to be keeping that line of communication open with them to make sure that they're getting me the updated info for our quarterly reports.
So Colette, just to piggyback on that, I'm not sure if everybody was aware, school districts are the first quarter of 2026-27 will be required to actually certify and upload their own random amount with time study list, participant list. And then that would not include any of the ESC providers. Each ESC is now working with Department of Medicaid, and the ESCs will be uploading their providers themselves. So your ESC providers will not need to be on your list.
That is great news.
Okay. Anything else the team wants to add on random moment time study before we move on to our next topic? All right. I think we'll make this maybe one of the last topics, and then I'll open it up for the panelists to talk about any sort of suggest advice, things that have worked well in your program. But expansion. And I know we have talked so much about expansion in the last 2 months that people are probably tired of everyone talking about expansion. But maybe we'll do around the horn here and talk about not so much, your rush to get ready for it, but what are you thinking about? What's changing for you operationally? If I'm a school district and I haven't even thought about Medicaid expansion and I'm, maybe let's say I'm a district that only has a few providers and I'm just doing all of the day to day and I haven't had time to think about it. What are the maybe 2 or 3 things that I need? Where do I need to start? Right? What are the things I must consider to have into place? So any just general advice, because I know there's a lot of angst and anxiety around Medicaid expansion and getting ready. And then the last is maybe to talk people off the ledge to say it's okay to slow down and get things right before you participate. And so I will shut up and turn it over to the people that know what they're doing at the LEAs.
So I think the number one thing districts needs to ask themselves before they proceed with the expansion is, are you adding additional providers to your cost report? If you are not adding any additional providers, you may run your numbers because it may not be worth the district's investment to expand services. If all of your nurses, especially for the smaller districts, if your nurses, OTs, PTs, if they're already on your current cost report, you're really not going to see that big of a pickup, because the way this expansion works is adding providers to your cost report. That's where you're going to see the pickup. So if that is not what is happening in your district, it may not be worth the investment to move forward with the expansion. So that's like my number one first.
I haven't really thought about that. I don't know who we end up adding. We have LPNs, for example. I don't know if those services could be added. I think right now, correct me if I'm wrong, they cannot document for Medicaid services. Is that correct?
Well, LPNs now, you want to include them because they can do the vision and hearing. And there
Right.
are some other services. So if you haven't included your LPNs or RNs prior, there's where, like Lisa said, that's a new ad. So that's where you would catch some additional funding in the expansion component. But yes, if LPNs and RNs, if they're not on, you should include them and make sure they're on your participant list. So they must be on your participant list to be in the program.
Okay. And then I'm thinking we could potentially add guidance counselors because they are providing intervention services, similar to our counselors or school social workers. I don't know if that would be something that we could capture, but that's something I would definitely want to look into.
So they have to be counselors, they have to be licensed professional counselors or clinical counselors. The guidance councils, their licensure is not approved, but if they do have the appropriate license for a clinical professional license or a social worker license, then we can add them.
So Lisa, can you repeat your suggestions? There
Yes.
seems to be some.
So the
Go ahead.
number one decision that districts need to think about is if you are adding additional providers. So for instance, prior to the expansion, so we have 90 nurses. Prior to the expansion, we had, I think, 27 nurses on our cost report that provided services for our students with disabilities. With the expansion, you have to look and see, hey, what other nurses can I add? Will I be able to add any additional nurses to the cost report? So by adding them, you look at like what they're doing. If they're doing all of your vision and hearing screenings for all students, then more than likely you're going to be adding them for those services because it's been expanded. So you're going to see a pickup of nurses. And so if you have 10 nurses in your district and previously your cost report, you had 2, based on what your nurses are currently doing, those services that or the work that they're currently doing, will it be or was it included in the expansion? So that's to say, hey, I had 10 nurses, 8 were doing gen ed vision screenings, the other 2 were only my special education nurses. So now, because you can bill for screenings, now you can add all 10 of your nurses. So you would see a net pickup of 8. And so you just have to, that is the number, that is the trigger to making this investment or any additional, tools that you'll need. That is the lever that's going to decide if your district should be expanding Medicaid.
And I do want to say that if HPC clients, if any of you are on the fence, you don't know, contact us and Kurtesh, Cheryl, myself. We will look at your prior cost report, help you identify some additional costs, see if it's beneficial. I actually worked with another school district earlier this year, and they already had all their nurses on there, and they were thinking about purchasing SNAP because they wanted to try and capture stuff. So they wanted to see if it was a good option for them to do that. So if you have questions like that, we can walk you through and see if you where you're at and if it's going to be beneficial for you to start adding services, or before you have other people who are providers that are already doing work. You're already getting their costs, so you might not want them to have to do additional work if it's not beneficial to the district. So I would say reach out to us. Would be happy to walk you through that process to help you make some decisions.
So just to clarify, so just to say our speech therapists, for example, if they're all already documenting for Medicaid, there'd be nothing to gain by having them document for interventions for speech therapy. Is that correct?
The only gain you'll see is you'll be getting the interim reimbursement. So when they document for those services, you'll just get that bottom line, the allowable cost. It'll come in your interim, and then your settlement would be less because you're getting it more upfront. But it's not increasing the overall allowable cost that the school district can obtain in that fiscal year.
Okay.
If that made sense.
That helps.
Okay.
Collette, would you like to add anything from your perspective?
I think we're going to start slow and start with our nurses, and then eventually add on our social workers. So we're doing baby steps. I figured training wise and getting everybody on board is going to be easier if we do baby steps versus throwing everybody in at once.
Yeah, I think that's depending on the situation, but I think the way you described it is a very smart approach, because everyone's talked about this on the call before, is like there's new processes that are going to come into place, right? And so it's like trial and error by adding a select group of providers like you're doing, Collette. I think it's very smart because with that is going to come more work. And so you'll be able to refine that before you move on to add a bigger group of individuals. We are 4 minutes away, so I'm going to close this out by asking all of the panelists a last question. Why don't we go alphabetical order? So we'll start with Collette, Jack, and then Lisa, you can round us out. There's maybe some new special ed directors here on the call. We've spoken to a lot of people that are new into the role. Roles are changing. They might be overwhelmed. You all, I'm sure, are taking on so much on a day-to-day. I mean, what's one piece of just general advice you would give to a new special director, a special ed director, or a special ed director that feels like he or she just doesn't have the time in the day to deal with everything? I mean, just anything generally, right? Like if you were starting over in your careers, I mean, any one general piece of advice that you would offer up to anyone on the call that's running a special education program. Collette, do you want to start for us?
Communication is a big part of our jobs. Keep communicating with your staff. That's probably the biggest thing I have.
Okay, that's a good one. Jack? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I would say similar to Colette, like communication, like our staff have to be comfortable and well versed on how to communicate why we're asking parent to sign that Medicaid consent form. Because if they botch that, then the parent is probably not going to give us consent to document for it. So just to make sure that every building has a point person for those meetings that can speak to that and be able to answer questions for parents. And I would say also, I didn't share before, but I would say, as far as annual consent, like we do a lot of our annual consent or annual notifications through our documentation on our meeting notes form. So we take documented notes every meeting, and just so that our parents are getting a copy of that updated notification every year. So I would just say, integrating processes like that will save you a lot of time in the end.
Great. Lisa, Floyd, you run a behemoth of a program. Do you want to close us out?
My biggest, I would say, as much as possible, is to integrate the Medicaid billing and work it into your current processes, where you are limiting or not adding to the current staff's workload. But just making like, hey, here's an additional form. You're already asking parents to sign, just slide in this additional form. And so as much as possible, not creating separate processes outside of their regular workflow for the purpose of like special ed or IHPs. So that has been it makes staff, oh, okay, just adding a form, because once they're comfortable, and so like with the parent consent form, just add it as a part of the meeting. You're asking parents to sign, especially for like initials. Parents are already being asked for consent to evaluate that initial. I just slide that form right in there as part of the packet. And so as much as possible, like making sure that you're not creating additional work, because you tend to get a bit more pushback when you're creating like additional work for staff.
Great. All right, we're at the top of the hour. I want to send a genuine thank you to our panelists, Lisa Floyd at Cleveland, Jack Stevens at Mad River, and Collette Fox at Sandusky for joining and providing some advice and some great insights on how they run what we consider very successful programs at their districts as it relates to the school Medicaid in Ohio. And thank you to our keyboard warrior, Cheryl at HPC, for answering as many questions as she can in the chat. If you didn't get your questions answered, please reach out to us directly. I'm not going to share Lisa and Jack and Colette's email right now just to spare the inbox. So we will filter the questions for them. And then if you've got one for them, send it our way. And then Lisa, Jack, and Collette, if you want to give me the permission from a digital perspective, let me know and we'll send it out. But for now, we will try to filter as many questions for you as we can. Thank you for everyone that joined. Thank you to our panelists, and we will see everyone at OASBO if you're going to be there.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you, Lisa, Collette, and Jack. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.